This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's November 17th, and on this day in 1968, it was the Heidi Game. It's hard to believe that there was a time when the NFL was not a big deal. And in today's world of streaming, where every NFL game is available to anybody who wants it, it's hard to even explain how something like the Heidi Game is even possible. But 1968 was the time before streaming, before cable television, before big money contracts between networks and sports leagues. And if you remember the story from a few months back about Monday Night Football, you'll recall that CBS and NBC both passed, and ABC was reluctant because of their primetime schedules. It was also a time before instant access to information. If you missed a game, well, then you had to wait until your next local news telecast at 11 p.m. to get a score, or you had to read about it in the next day's paper. Well, this game was between rivals and the best two teams in the AFL, the New York Jets at the Oakland Raiders, and the game was broadcast around the country on NBC. Fans watching on television saw some great football in this one. There was Jets quarterback Joe Namath throwing for 381 yards and a touchdown. The Raiders' Darryl LaMonica throwing for 311 yards and 4 touchdowns. The game was a seesaw affair with 6 lead changes. And with the game tied at 29, Jets kicker Jim Turner kicked a field goal with 1:05 left in the game to give New York the 32-29 lead. The kick went through the uprights just before 7 p.m. on the East Coast. While the battle on the field raged, there was a battle brewing at NBC. Executives eager to keep the game on the air past the prescribed time frantically called the NBC Broadcast Center, but nobody was answering the phone. The Raiders had the football, and when LaMonica dumped a pass off to Charlie Smith and he turned upfield for a 20-yard gain, NBC's broadcast supervisor, Dick Klein, switched everybody on the East Coast over to the scheduled movie presentation that Sunday night, a kids' movie titled Heidi. Phone lines blew up. Switchboard operators were inundated with angry phone calls from football viewers. The calls from those NBC executives were now blocked from getting through by the flurry of calls. So while everybody on the East Coast watched the story of Heidi, the orphan left to live with her cold and emotionally distant grandfather in the Swiss Alps, there was a heck of a finish brewing in Oakland. They missed this play, called by the legendary Kurt Gowdy for NBC.
LaMonica to Charlie Smith. Smith is hitting and he scores!
And then on the ensuing kickoff, the field of horrors struck the Jets again.
They squib this one to prevent a run back. Earl Presley fumbling it around. He fumbles the ball, and Oakland has it for a touchdown. Oakland has scored 2 touchdowns in 9 seconds.
2 touchdowns in 9 seconds, and the Raiders had shocked the Jets 43-32. But here's the thing. The assumption for those who were watching Heidi was that the Jets had won the game. Jets head coach Weeb Ewbank called his wife Lucy to let her know when they were headed to the airport. Well, Lucy told Weeb congratulations. For what? He asked. On winning the game, she replied. We lost, he screamed, not understanding what had happened. New York defensive back Johnny Sample remembers landing at the airport and meeting his father. His dad, seeing Johnny's disappointed face, asked what was wrong. "You guys won. You should be happy." "No, Dad, we lost." With the network phone lines clogged with angry callers, fans resorted to calling the telephone company, the New York Times, and the NYPD to go do something. Football fans wanted heads on spikes outside of NBC. Now, NBC ran a scroll with the final score at 8:20 during a dramatic scene of Heidi when the young girl is struggling to get out of a wheelchair and walk for the first time. And then they issued an apology later, chalking this one up to human error. Well, Klein, the guy who actually made the switch, refuted that as nonsense years later, saying that he had a contract and the order to run the movie. He had no choice. He said that if he had stayed with the game, there was an executive higher up on the ladder that told him that he would have been fired on the spot. But because of this game, networks adopted the stance to stay with the game until its conclusion before switching to regularly scheduled programming. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. On this day in 2007, it was an exciting finish in Knoxville, Tennessee. Despite being 12-point favorites coming in, the Tennessee Volunteers found themselves trailing 24-9 to Vanderbilt going into the fourth quarter. With losses to Florida and Alabama earlier in the year, another loss would prove fatal to their lead in the SEC East and their SEC title hopes. After a roughing the punter penalty on the Commodores, the Vols scored on the first possession of the fourth quarter with an Eric Ainge to Josh Briscoe passing catch. The deficit was down to 8. A 3-and-out by Vandy gave the ball back to Tennessee, which drove right back down the field and scored on an Ainge to Austin Rogers touchdown connection. The Vols' 2-point conversion to tie failed. Well, another 3-and-out by the Commodores and another punt gave it back to UT, and after Dennis Rogan ripped off a 45-yard return, the Vols were in business. The drive stalled, but well within field goal range for Daniel Lincoln to kick the go-ahead field goal. Vandy had a shot to win, though. DJ Moore returned the kickoff 55 yards and gave kicker Bryant Honfelt the chance to be the hero, but his 49-yard attempt grazed the wrong side of the upright, and Tennessee escaped with the 25-24 win. A win the following week against Kentucky put Tennessee in the SEC championship game. On this day in 1990, Houston quarterback David Klingler kept up his assault on the NCAA record book, and this record is likely to never be broken. The 12th-ranked Houston Cougars were playing at home against 1AA Eastern Washington, and this really was just bad timing for the Eagles. I mean, Houston was going to beat them regardless, but after the Cougars had their outside national championship hopes dashed the week previous by the Texas Longhorns, the now 9-1 Cougars had some frustrations to take out on somebody, and Eastern Washington just happened to be the sacrificial lamb. The Cougars scored on their first 6 possessions, and all on TD passes from Klingler. He kept up his aerial assault in the second half, completing 41 of 58 passes for 452 yards and 11 touchdowns. Oh, and he sat out the final 8:24. Cougar receiver Tracy Good said their defensive backs weren't too fast. It was like a scrimmage, really. Klingler's 11 touchdown passes topped the record of 9 in a game by San Diego State's Dennis Shaw, set back in 1969. And let's keep the points-scoring records rolling with what happened on this day in 1959, when Jim Brown scored 43 points. This was Brown's final game at Syracuse, and he went out in a blaze of glory. He scored all 27 of their first-half points with 4 touchdowns and 3 kick conversions. He added 2 more TDs and 4 additional PATs in a 61-7 win over Colgate. His 43 points in a game bested the 8-year-old record of 42 by Ole Miss's Arnold Showboat Boykin. Brown's record would stand for 34 years until Illinois' Howard Griffith scored 48 points in 1990. That record is now shared with 2 others. And on this day last year, English Premier League club Everton was hit with a league record 10-point penalty in the table. The penalty was for things done in the front office, not on the field. Everton was deemed to have broken profit and sustainability rules during a 3-year period. In essence, an English soccer club cannot lose more than $130 million over a given 3-year period. Well, to cover up the huge losses on the spreadsheet, there was a little bit of janky accounting done. The penalty dropped them in the table 5 spots from 14th down to 19th into the relegation zone. The penalty was later reduced to a 6-point penalty, which bumped them up 2 spots. The Toffees were able to keep themselves clear of relegation the rest of the way. And time now for today's Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. If you are a fan of Star Wars, you may already know this, but if you don't, the sound of the Empire's TIE Fighter was made by using a slowed-down version of an elephant call mixed with a car driving on wet asphalt. That's all I've got for you today. Come on back tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.